Hello everyone. In this video, we'll be walking through Project 5, which is the setup of the client-server architecture using MySQL Relational Database Management System. So I'm already logged in on the diary.io learning platform. And so quickly head over to the dashboard, the hamburger icon, and select dashboard. So click on projects. This is project 5. So go to projects, what is selected, and click on access projects. So this is the documentation for the client-server architecture with MySQL. So if you read through, you see where it says the client-server refers to an architecture in which two or more computers are connected together over a network to send and receive requests between one another. And so what this is saying is that in a client-server architecture, we have the client and the server. So the client sends the request and it also receives the response from the server. The client would be your laptop with the browser installed on it, while the web server is a normal server which has a web service installed on it, such as the web service running on it, such as the Nginx, the Apache, the Tomcat, and the likes. So once that software is installed on the server, it becomes a web server. So for this project, it says client-server architecture with MySQL. Since this is MySQL that we'll be installing on the server, it means the server will be a database server in this case. So that is the basic overview of what a client-server architecture is. You can have multiple clients and multiple servers. It just depends on the setup. But for this project, we're using one for each, which is one for the client and one for the database server. So quickly scroll down to the tasks which we're required to complete. Okay, before that, it says side self-study. It says we should read about ping and traceroute network diagnostic utilities. So the ping and traceroute network diagnostic utilities are networking tools which are used to troubleshoot network-related issues. So it's quite handy as a administrator. And also it says we should refresh our knowledge on basic SQL commands to be able to perform simple show, create, drop, select, and insert SQL queries. And so these queries, most of them were carried out, were shown to us in the previous projects, but also make some basic stats about them. The basic queries which are required for every database administrator. So we're using them in this project. Okay, so the first step for the project says to demonstrate the basic client server using MySQL RDBMS Relational Database Management System, we should follow the below instruction. Create and configure two Linux-based virtual servers, EC2 instances in AWS. So we should create the instances in the Amazon Web Service. So I'm already logged into the AWS console. So I click on EC2. Then launch instance. Okay. So I think it's a network issue. Let's try it again. Okay. I'm supposed to select root here only. Okay, so we have this. For this project, we'll be working with the Ubuntu distro. So select that. So next, configure instance details. We're working with two instances, so let's just create them as a go. Then, okay, Then for the subnets, we will use the US EC2A. Next, see, okay. Let's add the storage. Okay. Next is the tags. So this is optional. I usually create tags just so I know which instance I'm working with. Okay, client server. Next, we say we should create a new security group. So we're creating the Launch Wizard 3 security group, which has SSH access on port 22 for all addresses. So we review and launch. Okay. View instances. Okay, instances are being created. While that is being done, let's just name our instances so we know which is which. DB, this will be called DB server. Okay, and this will be called clients. Okay. Next up, we check the documentation once more. So we've created the two Linux-based virtual servers. Then it says on the MySQL server, Linux server, install MySQL server software. So we need to get the connection details for connecting to the database server. Copy this, and in our terminal, okay, let's use this one. Paste in the command. I'm already in the directory where I have my private key, where I have my credentials. That's the PEM file. So logging in. Okay. So the task is to install the MySQL server. So first of all, we run the sudo apt date command. Then we run the sudo apt install MySQL server. Okay. So it's installing the MySQL server. So it says MySQL is running, the daemon is running as PID 263. So the service is already running. So the next thing which we have to do is we have to enable the service. Sudo systemctl. Okay. MySQL is enabled. Next up, check the documentation. It says on the MySQL client Linux server, install MySQL client software. Okay, so we get the connection string for MySQL, the database, the client instance. So copy this and paste it in here. Yes. Okay. So same thing, we update sudo apt update. So this command just gets the updates from the repositories. So in cases whereby we don't have the updated repository, maybe we're trying to install something like Ansible, and it's not yet um, on our repository, we have to update. So next command we run sudo apt install MySQL client actually. Okay. Okay, so okay. So the documentation says the second part says by default both of your EC2 virtual servers are located in the same virtual network, so they can communicate to each other using local IP addresses. Use MySQL server's local IP address to connect from MySQL clients. MySQL server uses TCP port 3306 by default, so you will have to open it by creating a new entry in inbound rules in MySQL server security groups. For extra security, do not allow all IP addresses to reach your MySQL server. Allow access only to the specific local IP address of your MySQL client. So what this is saying is that we should create a new rule on a new entry on the inbound rules for our security group. The security group which is assigned to our instances. And so we should also allow connection on port 3306 to the IP address for the client server. So let's get that done. Okay. So click on the DB server, click on security. This is the security group, so click on it. Next, we edit the inbound rules. So as you can see, we just have only SSH on port 22. So add a rule. Okay, so it has populated the protocol for us, transmission control protocol, the port, and the source. We'll need to put in the IP address of the client in here. So let's get the IP address. I'm guessing this is the client. Okay, yes, this is where I installed the client on. So you can use the IP address show command. Okay, and so this is our IP address. That's the private IP address. So I've copied it. I'm going to paste it in here. Okay. So we save the rule. So next up, the documentation says we might need to configure MySQL server sorry, to allow connections from remote hosts. Okay, before we do this, if you recall, we just installed the client and the MySQL client and MySQL server on the client and server instances respectively. So we don't have a database, we don't have a user, we don't have a table, we don't have anything. We just have the services running on the servers. So we need a database on the MySQL server. We also need a user. So these are necessary things to configure in order for us to have access to, in order for us to carry out the remote access. So That's where the use of the basic MySQL command comes in. So this is the server instance. So we've installed the MySQL um, server. So first of all, would like to install, would like to run the security script, which is the MySQL secure installation. Sudo MySQL underscore secure installation. Okay, so this security script just helps us to prepare our MySQL server instance. So the validate password component is just used to test passwords and improve security. It says it checks the strength of the password and allows the users to set only those passwords which are secure enough. So for this setup, it's just a test setup, and I would like to use a simple password. So I won't be using the validate password components um, um, setup. But for security purposes or in a production environment, it's advised to use that. So I will just enter any letter, no. So it says I should set the password for root. So I'll be going with something simple, password. Okay, it says should it remove anonymous users? This is a yes. Should it disallow root login remotely? This is a yes. Remove test databases and access to it? Yes. Reload privileged tables now? Yes. So all done. So next up, we would like to run the sudo MySQL command. And so if you notice, when we ran the sudo MySQL command, it didn't ask us for a root password, even though we are running the command as root based on sudo. But the main concept here is this, it assumes that a user who runs this command with sudo is an administrative user, a MySQL administrative user. So once that is done, it uses the Unix socket to authenticate instead of using the password-based approach. This is for Ubuntu, though it might be different for other instances like I think the rel instance. So let's quickly create the user. We'll be creating a user named remote user. It's bigger. Okay, so we're creating a remote user. At this percentage sign means any password, any IP address can be used by the remote user when coming in. So the user should be identified with MySQL native password. And password for the user is password, something simple. Okay. Next up, we create the database. Okay. The database name is test_db. Okay. So next up, we grant privileges. Okay. So we have granted all privileges on the database named test_db to the remote user. Next, we flush the privileges. Okay. So our user is created, our database is created. So let's head over to the documentation once more. Now it says we should configure the MySQL server to allow connections from remote hosts. So the file is etc MySQL. Okay, let's just do that. Let's just do that. Okay, this is the file which we'll be working with. So it says we should run this command sudo vi etc MySQL on d/MySQL SQLD.cml. Okay, it says we should replace 127.0.0.1 to 0.0.0 like this. Okay, let's look at the image just to know what we're doing. Okay, we should look for a place where it says bind address. So quickly use a / just to get there faster and specify bind. So we're already there. Click on enter. Then I'm going to delete it. So I did that using DW. Just simply type in DW. But also just do it the normal way. Okay. So we've set up the bind address. Bind address is just a way for users to connect to the MySQL from different networks. So 0.0.0 is from any IP address. So we've edited the MySQL configuration file, so we have to restart the service sudo okay. So we restarted MySQL. So the documentation then says from MySQL client Linux server connect remotely to MySQL server database engine without using SSH. You must use the MySQL utility to perform this action. Okay, we already have the MySQL client software installed on the client instance. So let's test the setup. Let's clear the screen. So it is sudo MySQL -u remote user hosts IP address of the database server. Okay. Okay. So this is database server. So that's the hosts. So we attach the -p so for a password prompt. Password is password. Great. We're connected. So as you can see, we're connected from our client instance, and this is our database server. So let's check what the documentation says again. Check that you have successfully connected to a remote MySQL server and can perform SQL queries. So let's run this command, show databases. Right. I think this is okay. So we get to see our test DB, which was already created in the database server. So say something. If you see an output similar to the image below, then you have successfully completed this project. You have deployed the fully functional MySQL client service setup. Well done. You're getting there gradually. You can further play around with this setup and practice in creating or dropping databases and tables and selecting reports to and from them. So this is where we get to use the insert command, the select command, and the likes. So for this image, we have the information schema database learning project, the MySQL performance schema. These tables are not going to show because the user does not have it doesn't have permission to see them. And there's some databases which were already deleted when we ran our MySQL secure installation command. So those are reasons why we just have two databases here, right? So let's just run the select command to just select user host from MySQL. So this is just one of the basic commands, the select command. Okay, we can't actually do that because we are not, we don't have access to do that. Yeah, the user was only granted privileges for the test DB. But if we run this on the database server, it should work just to show us the user and the hosts. So that's that for this project. Exiting. Yeah, thank you.